The helicopter slicing through the skies of Vietnam wasn't the famous Huey. It was smaller, faster, and built for one purpose alone: to hunt. Its narrow fuselage earned it the nickname Snake, but to many North Vietnamese soldiers, it became something far more frightening. Long before modern attack helicopters dominated battlefields around the world, one aircraft changed the rules of war forever. This is the story of the Bell AH-1 Cobra, the most terrifying helicopter of the Vietnam War that many people have never heard of. By the mid-1960s, the United States had become deeply involved in Vietnam. Dense jungles, steep mountains, and hidden enemy positions made traditional ground warfare painfully difficult. The Army depended heavily on the UH-1 Huey helicopter to move troops, evacuate the wounded, and deliver supplies. The Huey quickly became the symbol of the war, but it had one major weakness: it wasn't designed to fight. Commanders often armed Hueys with machine guns and rockets, transforming them into improvised gunships. While these aircraft could provide supporting fire, they were slow, bulky, and vulnerable to enemy weapons. Every troop transport mission became a dangerous gamble. As helicopters descended into small jungle clearings, they were exposed to concentrated fire from well-hidden North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces. The Army needed something completely different: an aircraft built from the beginning to survive combat. Bell helicopter engineers already had an answer. They envisioned a slim aircraft with a narrow profile that would present a much smaller target to enemy gunners. Instead of carrying soldiers, every part of the design would focus on speed, agility, and firepower. The pilot and gunner would sit in tandem, reducing the helicopter's width while giving each crew member a dedicated role during combat. A powerful engine, short wings carrying rockets, and a rotating nose-mounted cannon transformed the helicopter into a flying weapons platform unlike anything seen before. The result was the AH-1 Cobra. When it first arrived in Vietnam in 1967, many soldiers immediately noticed the difference. The Cobra looked aggressive even while standing still. Its sharp nose, narrow cockpit, and stub wings gave it the appearance of a predator rather than a transport aircraft. More importantly, it could fly significantly faster than the Huey, maneuver more sharply through narrow valleys, and strike enemy positions with devastating accuracy before disappearing into the jungle sky. No one knew it yet, but this sleek helicopter was about to redefine battlefield air support. The jungles of Vietnam would become the proving ground for a machine that inspired attack helicopters across the world and earned a reputation that spread far beyond the battlefield. Combat quickly proved that the Cobra was far more than an experimental design. Within months of arriving in Vietnam, it was flying escort missions for Hueys, carrying infantry into some of the most dangerous landing zones in the country. The tactics were simple but brutally effective. Before troop helicopters touched down, Cobras would sweep over the landing zone at high speed, firing rockets and machine guns into suspected enemy positions. The goal wasn't simply to destroy targets, it was to overwhelm defenders before they could react. The Cobra's greatest advantage was its speed. Capable of flying well over 170 miles per hour, it could appear with little warning, unleash a devastating barrage, and disappear before enemy gunners had time to adjust their aim. Against guerrilla fighters hidden beneath thick jungle canopies, those precious seconds often determined whether an American air assault succeeded or failed. Its armament made the helicopter even more intimidating. Mounted beneath the nose was a rapidly traversing gun turret that allowed the gunner to engage targets independently of the helicopter's direction of flight. Depending on the mission, the Cobra could carry 2.75-inch rocket pods, grenade launchers, miniguns capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute, or combinations of these weapons. For enemy troops concealed in tree lines or bunkers, the sudden roar of rockets followed by streams of automatic fire could be devastating. Pilots quickly developed aggressive attack techniques. Rather than hovering over a target, a dangerous position for any helicopter, they performed fast diving attacks, releasing rockets before banking sharply away. These high-speed passes made the Cobra far harder to hit than the slower gunships it replaced. Experienced crews learned to work in pairs, one helicopter attacking while the other searched for hidden threats, constantly switching roles to keep pressure on enemy positions. The psychological impact soon became almost as important as the helicopter's firepower. Veterans from both sides later described how the distinctive silhouette of the Cobra generated immediate alarm. Its narrow fuselage, short wings loaded with rockets, and unmistakable profile were instantly recognizable. When the chopping sound of its rotor echoed across the jungle, soldiers understood that an attack could begin within moments. But Vietnam was never an easy battlefield, even for the Cobra. Dense vegetation concealed heavy machine guns and anti-aircraft weapons. Enemy forces became experts at camouflage, often waiting silently until helicopters committed to an attack before opening fire. Every mission demanded absolute concentration. Pilots flew only a few dozen feet above treetops, weaving through valleys, avoiding hills, and constantly searching for the faint flashes that revealed hidden gun positions. For Cobra crews, every flight became a contest of speed, skill, and survival. The helicopter had earned its reputation, but its most demanding battles were still ahead. By 1968, the AH-1 Cobra was no longer an experiment. It had become one of the U.S. Army's most valuable weapons in Vietnam. Wherever American troops faced heavy resistance, Cobra gunships were often among the first aircraft called into action. Their mission was clear: strike fast, protect friendly forces, and keep the enemy pinned down long enough for soldiers on the ground to regain the initiative. One of the Cobra's defining roles was the hunter-killer mission. These operations paired an OH-6A Cayuse, known as the Loach, with one or two Cobras. The tiny Loach flew dangerously low over the jungle, searching for concealed enemy fighters, bunkers, or supply routes. It deliberately drew fire, exposing hidden positions that might otherwise remain invisible. The moment enemy guns revealed themselves, the Cobra crews reacted almost instantly. Within seconds, rockets screamed through the trees, followed by bursts from the nose-mounted turret. What had seemed like an invisible enemy position suddenly became the focus of overwhelming firepower. The Loach escaped at full speed, while the Cobras continued their attack, often making repeated passes until the threat was neutralized. It was an incredibly dangerous tactic, but it proved remarkably effective against forces that relied on camouflage and surprise. The Cobra also became indispensable during emergency troop extractions. American units operating deep in hostile territory could quickly find themselves surrounded. Landing helicopters in those situations was almost impossible without covering fire. Cobra crews would circle the landing zone, firing rockets into nearby tree lines and suppressing enemy machine gun nests, while transport helicopters descended through smoke and flying debris. For many soldiers on the ground, the sound of approaching Cobras meant survival, yet every mission came with enormous risks. North Vietnamese forces steadily improved their defenses, deploying heavy machine guns, anti-aircraft cannons, and, later in the war, more sophisticated air defense systems. Cobra pilots rarely flew above the danger. To hit their targets accurately, they often attacked just above the treetops, placing themselves well within range of enemy fire. A single well-placed burst could cripple a helicopter in seconds. Despite these dangers, Cobra crews earned a reputation for extraordinary courage. Many flew multiple combat sorties every day, returning to battle even after witnessing fellow crews shot down. Their missions demanded constant awareness, watching for tracer rounds, avoiding hidden ridgelines, coordinating with ground commanders, and making split-second decisions while traveling at high speed through narrow jungle valleys. As the war continued, the Cobra proved something military planners around the world could no longer ignore. A helicopter designed specifically for attack could shape the outcome of battles in ways that armed transport helicopters never could. The lessons learned over Vietnam would influence military aviation for decades, but the Cobra's greatest legacy was still waiting to be written. As the Vietnam War drew toward its final years, the AH-1 Cobra had already secured its place in military history. More than 1,000 Cobras served in Southeast Asia, flying hundreds of thousands of combat hours in nearly every major operation. They escorted troop transports, defended isolated fire bases, hunted enemy positions hidden beneath dense jungle canopies, and provided life-saving support to soldiers under fire. For countless American troops, the sight of a Cobra diving toward the battlefield brought hope at the very moment the situation seemed hopeless. The helicopter itself continued to evolve. New variants received more powerful engines, improved weapons, and better protection for their crews. Engineers constantly refined the aircraft using lessons learned in combat, proving that Vietnam had become a testing ground not only for tactics, but for the future of military aviation. Every mission revealed new ways to improve speed, accuracy, and survivability. Perhaps the Cobra's greatest achievement wasn't measured by the number of rockets it fired or missions it completed. It was the fact that it introduced an entirely new category of aircraft, the dedicated attack helicopter. Before Vietnam, helicopters were primarily viewed as transports or utility machines that could occasionally provide fire support. The Cobra demonstrated that a helicopter built solely for combat could dominate the battlefield in ways fixed-wing aircraft often could not. It could remain close to friendly troops, respond within minutes, and deliver precise firepower exactly where it was needed. Military planners around the world paid close attention. The Soviet Union accelerated development of helicopters like the Mi-24 Hind, while the United States continued refining attack helicopter doctrine, eventually leading to one of the most recognizable combat aircraft ever built, the AH-64 Apache. Many of the tactics, crew layouts, and battlefield concepts that define modern attack helicopters can trace their origins directly back to the Cobra's combat experience in Vietnam. Today, the Cobra remains in service with several armed forces, a remarkable achievement for an aircraft whose design first took shape more than half a century ago. Although newer helicopters carry more advanced electronics and heavier weapons, the Cobra's sleek profile is still instantly recognizable to aviation enthusiasts and military historians alike. It represents the moment when helicopter warfare entered an entirely new era. Ironically, despite its revolutionary impact, the Cobra often lives in the shadow of the famous Huey. Movies, documentaries, and photographs usually celebrate the transport helicopter that carried soldiers into battle, while the aircraft protecting those missions receives far less attention. Yet without the Cobra, many of those operations might never have succeeded. The Bell AH-1 Cobra didn't simply fight in the Vietnam War, it transformed the battlefield forever. It proved that speed, precision, and overwhelming firepower could be combined into a single machine, changing military aviation for generations. For those who heard its rotors echo above the jungle, it wasn't just another helicopter. It was the sound that could mean rescue, survival, or the arrival of one of the most feared weapons of the Vietnam War.